The girl is being hunted, but cool vampire fell for her at first sight. No man can get near her." The night was alive with whispers. In the kingdom of Arendor, the moon hung like a silver blade over the jagged towers and cobbled streets. Shadows stretched long and black, sliding across the walls like liquid. Every alley seemed to hold a secret, every rooftop a silent watcher. And tonight one girl ran through them all, her breath ragged, her heart pounding like a war drum. Her name was Leora. She had always known she was different, though she did not yet understand how or why. There was a quiet power in her blood, a warmth that thrummed beneath her skin whenever danger neared. She had spent her life running from whispers and hunters, from those who wanted her for her gifts, though she did not know the full measure of her strength. The sound of footsteps echoed behind her, fast, determined, relentless. She darted through the narrow alleys, turning sharply, her bare feet brushing against the cold stones. Panic surged, but she forced herself to keep calm. Panic was dangerous. Fear made mistakes, and mistakes were deadly. A sharp edge of steel caught her eye. The hunter had cornered her at the end of a darkened street. His cloak rustled in the wind, his eyes glinting with something that made her stomach churn. Leora's fingers twitched, ready to run again, but the street seemed to shrink around her. Then, from above, a shadow moved. It was fast, fluid, impossibly quiet. Before the hunter could take another step, a figure dropped from the rooftops, landing silently behind him. The world seemed to slow. The hunter turned, startled. But before he could react, the figure had moved, a blur, a whisper of motion. The man, or something beyond human, was tall and lean, his presence dark and commanding. His hair fell in midnight waves, his eyes cold but bright, like stars trapped in ice. He moved with the grace of a predator, yet his hands did not strike the hunter. Instead, the hunter collapsed as if some invisible force had stopped his heart. Leora froze, her chest heaving. Her eyes met the stranger's. For a moment, the world outside the two of them ceased to exist. He looked at her as though seeing her for the first time, though she was certain he had been watching her from shadows unknown. His gaze was sharp, almost dangerous, yet there was something else, something she could not name, something magnetic. "No one will touch you," he said, his voice low, smooth, and carrying a weight that pressed against her chest. It was a promise, a threat, and a question all at once. Who are you?" Leora whispered, unsure if she should be afraid or grateful. Her instinct screamed that she should run, yet her feet remained rooted to the cold stone. "I am—" His lips curved in a small, almost imperceptible smile, but he did not finish the sentence. Rasp instead. He extended a hand and the air around him seemed to shimmer. "Follow me if you wish to live tonight." Hesitation battled within her, but the truth was clear. She had no other choice. The hunter was gone, but the others would not be. The streets were crawling with men who would kill for the power she did not fully understand. And this stranger, this vampire, though she did not yet know his kind, was the only shadow between her and death. They moved together through the streets. The stranger's movements were silent, almost unreal. Leora felt the night pressing closer, but with him it felt like she could breathe. The air itself seemed to bend around him, and she realized something terrifying. He was not human. Not entirely. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice trembling. He glanced at her, and for a heartbeat, his cold expression softened. "Because no one touches you. Not while I breathe. And because—" He hesitated, as if the truth were too dangerous to speak aloud. "Because you belong to no one but yourself." And yet, his eyes lingered on her with a hunger he did not hide. The words sent a shiver down her spine. A part of her wanted to pull away, to deny the strange pull that twisted her chest, but another part, a part that had always been lonely and hunted, longed to trust him. They reached the edge of the city, where the buildings gave way to cliffs and jagged forests. The wind whipped fiercely, tugging at her hair and her cloak, carrying with it the distant cries of hunters who had lost their prey. The stranger paused at the edge, his silhouette framed by the silver moon.
"You can hide here," he said.
For now. But the world outside will not forgive you for long. I don't know how to, Leora began, but the words faltered, or she could not explain what she did not yet understand. Then you will learn, he said softly, almost like a promise and almost like a warning. And I will teach you, if you wish. For the first time in her life, Leora felt a flicker of hope, but hope was dangerous. It made her heart ache with longing she did not yet understand, for a life she had never dared to imagine. The vampire led her to an abandoned tower on the edge of the forest, where the shadows clung to the walls like living things. Inside, the air was cool and heavy, smelling faintly of earth and stone. Breaths. It was a refuge, though temporary. She sensed the power that lingered here, and it made her skin prickle. Rest, he instructed, his eyes scanning the forest beyond the tower. Tonight was only the beginning. They will come again. She nodded, but she could not sleep. Desk. Her mind raced with questions, with fear, with the strange pull she felt toward the man who had saved her life. Breaths, his power, and the reason he had chosen to protect her when no one else would. Hours passed, and the moon moved high above the towers. The forest outside whispered and shifted as though alive. Then from the shadows a soft sound reached her ears, the sound of wings brushing the night air, or perhaps a shadow slipping through the trees. The vampire did not speak, but Leora felt his presence tense beside her. He was aware of the danger of the hunters who had not yet given up, and of something else, something darker that lingered in the corners of the night. Suddenly a rustling broke the stillness. Leora froze, and he moved like lightning, positioning himself between her and the unknown threat. His eyes glinted, fangs barely visible in the moonlight. The air seemed to hum with the promise of violence. "Stay behind me," he murmured. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "They will not take you." She swallowed hard, heart hammering in her chest. The reality of her situation pressed down on her. She was hunted, always hunted, but now she had a protector unlike any other. And yet, the danger was far from over. The night dragged on, each moment stretched with tension. Every sound, the snap of a branch, the distant howl of a wolf, the whisper of wind, made her flinch. And through it all, he watched her, silent, imposing, and impossibly beautiful in the darkness. Finally, as the first faint light of dawn brushed the edges of the forest, he spoke. "Rest now, but do not think this ends. The moment you open your eyes, the world will be waiting." And so will they. D'essay. Leora closed her eyes, exhaustion threatening to overwhelm her. Yet even in sleep, the pull she felt toward him did not fade. It was a tether, invisible yet unbreakable. A strange warmth bloomed in her chest, a mixture of fear, longing, and something she dared not name. Deuce. When she woke, the tower was silent. The forest outside was quiet, but the memory of the night's events lingered like smoke in the air. She turned to look at him, but he was already gone, vanished into the shadows as if he had never been there. A single feathered shadow drifted across the floor, a reminder that he had been there, watching, protecting. Her heart ached with confusion and something more. A connection she could not yet understand. Outside, the wind carried a warning, soft and clear. The hunters would return, and this time they would not be so easily stopped, but neither would she run alone. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the trees, he waited. Watching, protecting, and perhaps waiting for her to choose to trust him completely. Her pulse quickened as she stepped outside. The kingdom was vast, dangerous, and filled with enemies she could not yet name. But for the first time, she did not feel entirely alone. And somewhere in the shadows, he observed her, a figure of dark elegance and terrible power. A promise lingered in his eyes, and a warning on his lips. No one will touch you, not while I am here. But the question that neither dared speak lingered in the air. How long could he protect her? And what would happen if she fell into danger too great even for him? The night had only begun. The forest beyond the abandoned tower was alive with shadows. Moonlight spilled through the branches, painting silver lines across the mossy floor. Leora walked beside him, her steps careful, her senses sharp. Every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves made her flinch. But he was always there, moving silently, a guardian whose presence she felt more than she saw. He called himself Kale, though he said names were fragile, fleeting things, and sometimes he preferred silence. She did not question it. She had learned that names could be dangerous, and the fewer secrets spoken aloud, the safer one remained. "You are restless," Kale observed, his eyes reflecting the silver light. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of centuries. "I am hunted," Leora said, the words trembling out. "I cannot rest. Not while they are out there." "You are stronger than you realize," Kale said softly. "Ben Nistao, stronger than those who chase you, stronger than the fear you carry. But strength alone will not save you." Breaths. Uncertain. Strength had always been a burden. It drew eyes, stirred envy, and invited danger. All she wanted was to survive another night, to breathe, and to remain unseen. Yet with Kale, the very air seemed different. Alive, protective, dangerous, yet comforting. He moved ahead, silent and graceful, and she followed. Hours passed in a tense quiet, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl or the whisper of wind through the trees. Then he stopped abruptly, his body rigid, senses stretched. "Something approaches," he said. His eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, reflecting the danger she could not see. "And they are clever." Too clever to chase openly. Leora's heart stuttered. "Hunters!" Kale nodded. "Hunters and worse. Those who understand the value of your blood and power. They will not relent." Breaths. She swallowed hard. The thought of being hunted, cornered, powerless, made her stomach churn. But something inside her stirred too, a spark she did not understand. Perhaps it was fear, or perhaps the strange exhilaration of walking beside Kale, knowing he would fight for her without hesitation. Hours later they reached a hidden cave on the edge of a cliff, where the wind howled and the trees bowed as if in reverence. It was a sanctuary, carved into stone and shadow, shielded from those who sought to harm her. "You will remain here," Kale said, his tone final yet not unkind. "It is safe, for now. But you must learn to defend yourself. You cannot rely on me alone." I don't know how," she whispered. Her hands trembled as she clutched her cloak closer. "You will," he said simply. Then, after a pause, he added, "And you will learn quickly. Survival requires more than hiding." For hours he instructed her, not with words alone, but with presence. He moved with lethal precision, and she watched, studied, tried to mimic his grace. It was exhausting, yet exhilarating. She could feel her body awakening to possibilities she had never imagined. The fear remained, but it was tempered by the thrill of discovery. At one point, Leora faltered, stumbling on the rocky floor. Cale's hand shot out, catching her wrist, steadying her before she could fall. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. A flicker of warmth, a tremor of connection that neither dared name. "You are impatient," Cale murmured, almost teasing, but his eyes held a warning. "Control yourself. The world is cruel, and impatience invites death." She nodded, cheeks burning. His closeness, his strength, his quiet authority. It was intoxicating, yet terrifying. She wanted to lean into it, to trust him completely, but the lessons of being hunted lingered in her mind. Trust had always been a luxury she could not afford. The first night passed without incident, but the next evening danger arrived in a form Leora had not anticipated. A hunter, cloaked and silent, slipped into the shadows near their sanctuary. Leora sensed him before Cale did, the hairs on her arms rising in warning. Her instincts screamed and she acted, drawing on a hidden reserve of courage she had not known she possessed. The hunter froze, taken aback by the suddenness of her movement. Cale appeared moments later, a shadow among shadows, and the hunter's life ended before he could fully understand what had struck him. "You are more than you think," Cale said, his eyes fixed on her with something she could not decipher. Admiration? Surprise? Death? Something darker. "I didn't mean to." "No one expects to face themselves in a moment of fear," he said quietly. "But fear can teach, and it can protect. You acted instinctively and you survived. That is all that matters." That night, Leora could not sleep. She stared at the shadows dancing across the walls of the cave, thinking of the hunter and of Cale. She felt a strange longing, a pull toward him she could not name, a desire to understand the being who had saved her life so effortlessly. Cale remained silent, watching her from the corner. His presence was overwhelming, yet strangely comforting. In dusk, the paddles fought, the nights endured, the hunger for connection buried beneath layers of darkness, and she felt a pang of sorrow for him, though she barely knew him. "You think too much," Cale said suddenly, his voice cutting through her thoughts. "I cannot help it," she admitted. "I have always had to think, to survive, to stay alive." He studied her for a long moment. "Perhaps. Or perhaps you have learned to distrust life itself. That is dangerous, and yet it makes you strong." Their conversations were sparse, but each word carried weight. Each glance, each movement was a lesson, a bond, a subtle shift in the strange power dynamic between them. She was alive because of him, yet he relied on her courage as much as she relied on his strength. Days passed, and with each passing moment, Leora learned more about herself and about him. Cale revealed fragments of his past, tales of centuries filled with solitude, battles, and losses that had hardened him. Yet beneath the darkness, she glimpsed vulnerability, a longing for something he had denied himself for far too long. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the forest in shades of violet and gold, Cale spoke again. "There is something you must know," he said, voice grave. "You are hunted not for what you have done, but for what you are. Your blood, your power, it is rare, dangerous. Those who pursue you are not merely hunters. They are seekers of control." "What do they want from me?" "Control," he said simply. "And perhaps more." "There are forces in this kingdom that would see you broken, bent, or used, and if you fall into their hands—" His voice trailed off, the threat unspoken, but unmistakable. She shivered, the weight of her reality pressing down upon her. Yet even amidst the fear, a strange defiance rose within her. He would not be broken. She would not be bent. And somehow, she would not be alone. Cale studied her, eyes narrowing. "You have fire," he said. "But fire must be guided, or it will consume you." "I don't understand," she admitted, her voice small. "You will," he said simply, "and I will help you learn." "But you must trust me. Trust." The word hung between them, fragile as glass. She wanted to trust him, yet years of being hunted, of betrayal and fear, made her hesitate, and yet something in her heart whispered that she could, that perhaps she must. The shadows gathered at the edge of the cave, and the distant sound of movement reminded them that the world beyond was still dangerous. Leora realized that survival was no longer enough. She had to fight. She had to understand her power. And she had to trust Cale, whether she wanted to or not. Night fell fully, and the moon rose high, casting silver light over the rocky landscape. Cale moved to the edge of the cave, eyes scanning the darkness. "They are near," he said, but tense. "And soon they will come for you again." Leora felt her pulse quicken. Fear, yes, but also something else, something she could not name, a strange, dangerous excitement at the thought of facing the world alongside him. She had always been hunted, always been alone, and yet now, she was not. Cale turned toward her, expression unreadable, yet his gaze held a promise she could feel in her bones. "Remember this," he said, voice soft, yet carrying authority. "No one touches you, not while I am near. And if they try," his words trailed off, but the meaning was clear. The night stretched on, full of whispers and shadows. Somewhere in the forest, danger moved like a living thing, seeking her. But this time Leora was not merely running. She was learning. Desperate, she was fighting. And she was beginning to feel the pull of something she had never allowed herself before. Trust, and perhaps something more. The first howl of a wolf broke the silence, followed by a rustling of leaves, a sound that made her heart leap. She knew the hunters would not rest. They would come for her again, and when they did, she would not be alone. Cale's presence was constant, unyielding, protective. His eyes gleamed in the moonlight, a reminder that while the night was dangerous, it also held guardians. And she, for the first time in her life, felt that perhaps she could survive, not merely by running, but by standing her ground, by learning, and by trusting the shadowed figure who had stepped into her life. And somewhere, deep in the forest, eyes glinted from the darkness. Someone watched. Someone waited. The next encounter would not be so easily escaped. The night was far from over, and Leora knew it. But she also knew one truth, stronger than fear or doubt. She was not alone. And Cale would not let anyone touch her. The forest seemed darker that night, though the moon hung high, casting a pale silver glow over the twisted trees. Shadows pooled beneath the trunks, thick and shifting like living water. Leora walked beside Cale, her footsteps silent on the mossy ground. She had learned to move like him, fluidly, almost unseen, yet her pulse beat a rapid rhythm she could not tame. Cale's presence was constant, a shadow beside her, protective and watchful. His eyes glimmered in the moonlight, sharp and alert, scanning the forest for any sign of threat. But tonight, there was more than danger in the air. There was a strange tension, almost like electricity, that made Leora's skin prickle and her heart hammer. "Something stirs," Cale murmured, his voice low and distant. "And it is not only the hunters." "What do you mean?" He did not answer immediately. His gaze held hers for a long moment, deep and unreadable, before he said, Your blood, it calls to them. And it calls to things you do not yet understand. Her stomach tightened. She had known her blood was special, that it carried power others craved. But she had never felt it like this, vibrating beneath her skin, like fire running through her veins. The sensation was frightening, yet intoxicating. What is happening to me?" she whispered, fear lacing her voice. Kale's expression softened, the cold mask he always wore slipping for an instant. "You are awakening," he said quietly. "And awakening is dangerous. Those who seek you will stop at nothing to control what you have yet to understand." And his gaze darkened, stormy and unreadable.
I will do everything to protect you.
"But even I cannot shield you from yourself." Bah. "I don't understand. I've never wanted power. I only wanted to survive. And survival, Kale said, will no longer be enough." They moved deeper into the forest, following a narrow path that twisted like a silver thread under the moonlight. The air grew colder, heavier, as if the night itself were pressing down upon them. The whispers of leaves in the wind sounded almost like voices. Warning, guiding, mocking. Suddenly a sound tore through the forest. The crack of a branch underfoot. Deliberate and sharp. The aura froze, and Kale's body went rigid. His eyes narrowed and his fangs caught the moonlight for a fleeting moment. "They have found us," he said, voice a low growl. "Get ready." From the shadows emerged a group of hunters, clad in dark leathers and carrying weapons that gleamed under the moon. Their eyes were fixed on Leora, calculating, hungry, and filled with a cold determination that made her chest tighten. Kale stepped forward, a protective barrier between her and the hunters. "You will not touch her," he said, voice sharp as steel. The forest itself seemed to respond to him, shadows swirling around his form, lending him a presence that was both terrifying and majestic. The hunters hesitated for a moment, as if sensing the unnatural force standing before them, and then, with sudden violence, they attacked. Kale moved with inhuman speed, a shadow among shadows. Leora watched in awe and fear as he dispatched one hunter after another, his movements fluid and precise, yet terrifying in their intensity. It was beautiful and deadly, and Leora felt a strange thrill in the presence of such power. And then, it happened. One of the hunters lunged at Leora from the side. Her fear ignited something deep inside her, something raw and unstoppable. A surge of energy burst from her, strong and wild, and the hunter was thrown back as if struck by an invisible force. The trees shuddered, and the air trembled around her. Kyle stopped, eyes wide, watching her. "Your power," he whispered, almost to himself. "It has awakened." Leora's hands shook. I didn't mean... You did not need to," Kale said, stepping closer. "You acted instinctively. That is enough." But the awakening was not gentle. Leora could feel it pulling at her, demanding control, threatening to overwhelm her. Her blood burned, and her pulse raced, echoing through the forest like a drum. Kale reached out, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. His touch was grounding, yet his eyes held a storm of emotion. Fear, awe, and something she could not name. "Psst. You must learn to control it," he said, "or it will control you." "I don't know if I can." "You can," Kyle said firmly. "And I will help you. But first, you must trust me completely." Trust. The word hung heavy in the air. Leora wanted to more than anything, but the hunter's presence, the raw power coursing through her, and the intensity of Kale's gaze made her hesitant. Base. Yet at that moment, she realized something profound. She could not survive alone, and perhaps she did not want to. The forest fell silent for a long moment. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then a low, resonant laugh echoed through the trees, a sound that made Leora's blood run cold.
"They are coming," Kale said, his voice taut with tension.
And they are stronger than before. From the shadows emerged a new figure, a hunter unlike the others, taller, cloaked in black, and radiating a dark energy that made the hairs on Leora's arms stand on end. His eyes gleamed with malice, and he carried an aura of command that made even Kale tense. "Who is that?" Leora whispered, fear tightening her throat. "He is the leader," Kale said grimly. "And he knows of your power. He will stop at nothing." The tension was unbearable. Leora felt the surge of energy inside her pulse violently, responding to the threat. She could feel her blood calling out, drawing in the power around her, ready to protect, ready to strike. Kale moved closer, standing between her and the hunter, his eyes blazing with a protective fire that made her chest ache. "You will not touch her," he repeated more forcefully this time. The shadows around him thickened, swirling with his presence, and the air seemed to hum with power. The leader stepped forward, voice smooth and cruel. "Your little ward is powerful," he said, eyes fixed on Leora. "But even she will fall. Power cannot save her from what is coming." Leora felt fear, yes, but also something else, a rising determination, a spark of courage she had not known she possessed. She would not be a victim. She would not be hunted. Not while Kale stood beside her, and not while the power within her surged, demanding release. Kale glanced at her, reading the shift in her demeanor. "Do you feel it?" he asked, voice low. "I feel it, and I won't let it control me." "Good," he said. "Then show me." Together they moved as one. Leora focused on the energy inside her, guiding it with trembling hands, while Kale's presence anchored her, lending strength and precision. The forest erupted with power, shadows twisting, wind howling, and the leader stumbling back in shock. The hunters faltered, unprepared for the force that radiated from Leora. She felt alive in a way she had never known, as if the fear and loneliness of her past had been burned away by the fire of awakening. And through it all, Kale's eyes never left hers, steady, unwavering, and filled with something she could not yet name but could feel in the depths of her heart. The leader recovered quickly, his expression darkening. "This is not over," he hissed, retreating into the forest with his followers. "We will return." Leora sank to her knees, exhausted, trembling, yet strangely exhilarated. She had survived. She had fought. And she had not been alone. Kale knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Des, you did well," he said, voice soft but firm. "More than well. You are stronger than you know. And you are not alone." "Never forget that!" She looked up at him, eyes wide and filled with questions she could not yet voice. His expression was unreadable, yet in his gaze, she felt a connection that went beyond words, something ancient, powerful, and terrifyingly beautiful.
"You have changed," Kale said quietly, almost.
Oh, and so has everything else. Nothing will ever be the same. Leora shivered, both from exhaustion and from the strange, powerful pull she felt toward him. She had never known fear and wonder in equal measure, yet she realized now that they could coexist. She could feel her heart opening to the possibility of something she had never allowed herself to hope for. Trust, safety, and perhaps even love. But the night was not over. Even as they rested in the shadows of the forest, the wind carried a warning. The hunters would return, stronger and more determined. And somewhere in the darkness another presence stirred, a shadow older, darker, and far more dangerous than any they had faced before. Leora tightened her hands, feeling the surge of power within her. She would not be hunted. Desk. She would not be weak. And she would not be alone. Not while KL was by her side. Yet, even as the bond between them deepened, a question lingered in the air, unspoken but heavy. Could their combined strength be enough when the darkness they faced was older and more relentless than either of them imagined? The forest fell silent, the moon casting silver light over their resting place. But the night itself seemed alive, watching, waiting. And somewhere beyond the shadows, a whisper of movement reminded them both. The next battle would come, and it would test everything they had, everything they were, and everything they could become. The hunt was far from over. And Kale and Leora knew it. The forest had fallen into an uneasy silence. The wind whispered through the trees like a mournful song, carrying shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. Leora stood beside Kale at the edge of a rocky cliff, the moon casting silver light across her face. Her heart still pounded from the recent battle. But tonight was not about rest. Tonight would decide everything. Kale's gaze swept across the darkness below, where the silhouettes of approaching hunters were barely visible. Their leader, the one who had survived the last confrontation, moved at their forefront, his presence more commanding, more dangerous than before. But there was something else as well, a shadow that lingered behind him, a presence darker and older than any Leora had ever felt. "They are not merely hunters," Kale said quietly, voice low but tense. "They serve something older, something that seeks you, Leora. Your power calls to it, and it will not be denied." Her hands tingled with the energy coursing through her veins. She had trained, she had learned, and she had faced her fear. But the thought of this unseen, ancient threat made her pulse quicken. "I am ready," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I will fight. I will protect everything I care about." Kale's eyes softened, and for a moment the centuries of solitude and war that had hardened him seemed to fall away. "Then we fight together," he said. "No one touches you. Not now, not ever." The hunters advanced, their weapons glinting in the moonlight. But Leora did not hesitate. She could feel her power thrumming through her, a pulse of life and fire that called to the very shadows around them. She raised her hands, focusing on the force that had awakened within her. The air shivered, thick with magic and anticipation. Trees bent as if bowing to the power that had erupted from her blood. The leader of the hunters stopped, eyes wide, sensing the surge of energy. "Impossible," he whispered. "She should be nothing." And yet, Kale moved beside her, silent and deadly, his presence a shield against the approaching danger. Together they were a force unlike any the kingdom had ever seen. Shadows swirled around them, bending to Kale's will, while Leora's power flared with an intensity that made the forest itself shudder. The first strike came from the leader, a blade of black steel aimed directly at Leora. But she was ready. With a surge of energy, she thrust her hands forward, and the force of her power threw him backward, his cloak billowing like smoke. The hunters faltered, fear flashing in their eyes, for this girl they had hunted was no longer helpless. Kale moved swiftly, intercepting another hunter who lunged at her from the side. Bracement. His movements were graceful, deadly, yet almost protective, as if every strike was meant to shield rather than destroy. Leora watched him, a mixture of awe and longing filling her chest. Desk. She had never seen someone so commanding, so beautiful, so terrifying. And yet, he was hers to trust, hers to stand beside. Burst. As the battle raged, the shadow behind the leader stirred. It was a presence older than Kale himself, dark and vast, and it pulsed with a hunger that made Leora's blood run cold. She felt its gaze, like icy fingers tracing her spine, and she realized the truth. This was the force that had guided the hunters, the reason she had been hunted all her life. He turned to her, eyes wide and sharp. "It is here," he said. "Dove, and it knows you. We must end this cord together." Leora nodded, swallowing the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. She could feel her power responding to the presence, growing, expanding, filling her with warmth and fire. This was not just a fight for survival. It was a fight for destiny, for the right to live, to be free, and to be herself. The shadow moved, coalescing into a form both terrifying and magnificent. It was a being of darkness and light. Wings like midnight smoke, eyes that burned with ancient knowledge, and a presence that dwarfed the hunters and even Kale. Leora's breath caught in her throat. "You have grown strong," the being said, its voice echoing like thunder and wind. "But strength alone will not save you. Your power belongs to me." "You are wrong," Leora said, her voice steady, trembling only slightly. "I am not yours. I am mine. And I will not be taken." Kale stepped closer, his hand brushing hers. "Stay." A spark of energy passed between them, a bond stronger than anything in the night. "Together," he said. "Whatever comes, we are together." The shadow laughed, a sound that rattled the very air. It attacked, wings whipping through the forest, twisting reality around them. The hunters scattered, useless before the power unleashed. Kale moved with impossible speed, intercepting the attacks, protecting Leora as she focused all her energy. She raised her hands, letting the magic flow freely, guided by instinct and her growing confidence. The forest responded, the shadows bending to her will. The dark force surged toward her, but she did not falter. She met it with a burst of light and energy, a force that illuminated the forest, blinding even the moon. Kale stood beside her, fangs bared, eyes glowing, striking with precision. Each move they made was a dance of power and trust, of fire and shadow, each strike protecting, guiding, and supporting the other. The being of darkness recoiled, its form flickering, weakening in the presence of their combined force.
"You are not alone," Kale shouted over the roar of the night.
"And neither is she." The shadow let out a sound like breaking stone, recoiling from the intensity of Leora's magic and Kale's presence. For the first time, it seemed hesitant, uncertain, as if it had underestimated the strength of the bond between human and vampire. Leora felt a surge of clarity. This power was hers, but it was also theirs. Hers and Kale's, a connection that had grown from trust, courage, and something deeper, something she could now name. Love. With a final, desperate burst of energy, Leora unleashed the full force of her power. Light and shadow collided in the clearing, the forest shuddering, leaves torn from branches, and the air trembling with the sheer force of their will. The dark being screamed, a sound that tore through the night, and then with a flash of silver and black, it vanished, leaving only silence in its wake. The hunters, leader included, fled, their courage broken. Leora sank to her knees, exhausted, trembling from the intensity of the battle. Kale knelt beside her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder, steadying her. "Did it," he said softly, voice full of awe and something else, pride perhaps, or relief. "You controlled it. You are more than I ever imagined." She looked at him, tears glimmering in her eyes. I couldn't have done it without you. And you never will, he said quietly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Not now. Not ever. We face everything together. For a long moment, they simply held each other, breathing in the silence of the forest, the aftermath of battle, and the strange peace that followed. The danger was gone, but the memory of it lingered like smoke, a reminder of all they had faced and all they had survived. You are remarkable, Kael said, his eyes scanning her face. And I? He hesitated, the centuries of solitude breaking in the words he almost never spoke. I cannot imagine standing beside anyone else. Only you. Leora's heart ached, a mixture of longing, relief, and the deep warmth of trust and love. I feel the same, she whispered. The forest seemed to breathe around them, alive with whispers of the night, shadows moving softly like attendants in the moonlight. The air was clear, yet still thrummed with residual magic, a reminder that the world they had fought to protect was vast, dangerous, and ever-changing. Kyle stood, extending his hand to her. She took it, feeling the strength and warmth in his touch, the bond that had grown through fear, trials, and shared danger. Together they stepped toward the cliff's edge, looking out over the kingdom. The night stretched endlessly before them, filled with stars that seemed to shine brighter for their triumph. We survived, Leora said quietly, her voice full of wonder. Yes, Kael said, eyes soft as they met hers. And now, the future is ours. The wind swept around them, carrying the scent of pine and the faint, lingering echo of magic. Leora felt a sense of freedom she had never known, a release from fear and solitude, replaced by trust, courage, and the realization that she could face anything with Kael by her side.
You are no longer hunted, Kael whispered, drawing her close.
No one touches you. Not now. Not ever. She leaned against him, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, the strength and warmth of his presence. The world was still dangerous, still filled with shadows and threats. But for the first time, she did not feel alone. And he was no longer merely a shadow, a guardian or a predator. He was hers to trust, hers to stand beside, hers in ways that went deeper than words, deeper than time itself. Together they faced the rising moon, the kingdom below, and the endless night. And though the world would always hold dangers, for now, they had won. Together, the forest whispered around them, and the stars gleamed like silent witnesses. The girl who had once been hunted was free, her power alive, her heart open, and her soul bound to the vampire who had fallen for her at first sight. The night was theirs, and with it a new beginning.